Hey, everybody, you're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comics, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in. And we are thrilled to bring back to the show, for the first time in ages, Dave Ebersole and Zan Christensen. Dave is the writer of the gay neo-noir thriller comic book Dash, which is being collected in a trade that is the subject of a Kickstarter that's happening right now. And that book is published by Zan Christensen's imprint, Northwest Press. So, guys, again, thank you very much for coming back on. So, Dave, one of us could give the squib in regards to Dash, but why don't we hand it off to you to provide the Reader's Digest elevator pitch version of what Dash is about?
Sure. I just want to say thanks for having me back. Long-time listener, second-time caller. Dash is the short elevator pitch is the Maltese Falcon meets the Mummy meets hints of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's about a through the eyes of a private detective in 1940s Los Angeles. Someone close to him dies, and he has to pretty much solve the murder. And he finds at the heart of the murder is kind of this ancient Egyptian cult, and he kind of has to use the help of his friends to kind of figure out his own destiny. You know, like your typical weekend.
Okay, and again, as we mentioned, Dash is being published by Northwest Press. Zan Christensen is the publisher of that company. So, Zan, why don't you tell us a little bit about Northwest Press and also anything else you might want to talk about Dash in relation to the Kickstarter that's going on right now?
Sure. Northwest Press has started because I used to, or still am sort of, been involved in queer activism in comics and queer, social organizing and helping creators find readers. Was working with Prism Comics for a long time, was founding president of that organization. And people kept asking me when I was working with Prism, will you publish my book? Will you publish my book? And Prism doesn't publish books. So finally, it occurred to me, a friend of mine, John Macy, had a book that he'd been working on for years. And I just thought that it deserved a really big audience and needed to be, needed a team to work on it. So that was the first book, and that was 10 years ago. So it's been 10 years of Northwest Press. Dash, it turns out, if you count all the books, we've done 2 non-comics books, but everything with a spine. This is the 20th book that we've done. And it goes from anthologies with humor to adventure to kind of sexy things, everything. And the only through lines are that they're good comics and they're queer comics. And Dash is great. Dash is, I think, one of the first books that I published that was not by somebody that I already knew. Mostly I've published people that I've been fans of or who've known me. And this was one actually that was pitched. You can pitch a comic book at a convention and have it published by a publisher, because that's exactly what happened. He brought a copy of the Dash preview book to me at Comic-Con in San Diego, if I remember correctly. And I'm like, oh, what's this? And so that was it. We started doing it.
And everybody told me you don't pitch on the floor at San Diego Comic.
So rude. So rude.
But I did.
They're full of lies.
And the 6th issue of Dash is in previews this very month. So we're doing we're getting a little head start on funding the graphic novel version. But if you've been a reader of Dash, this is the big final issue of the first story arc. So tell your local retailer to stay closed, but to get you a comic, and they can slip it under the door and you can just get it from them.
Okay. And Dave, from what I understand, that there is material that's going to be included in the trade collection that has not been released as part of the single issue campaign. So why don't you tell us about that material?
Yeah, there's almost 40 pages of news story in it. There's the main story, which is Dash kind of has to investigate into, old school Hollywood. And he kind of finds some pieces of his past still there in this kind of scandal that he has to investigate. And that art is done by Sean Von Gorman. And then we have 2 short stories of kind of like the origin stories of Dash and how he met his friends. And the art there is done by Vinnie, who took on the last 2 issues. And all the art looks great. I can't wait for people to see it. We have some previews up on the Kickstarter right now. We're going to be revealing more of Sean's stuff as it goes, and it's kind of a big reveal, because there's an old school character that sort of is involved. So I'm excited for people to kind of see that. I'm excited for people to see all of it, honestly. But
All right, awesome. Now, the way that interviews on this show run are very much like relay races. So I'm taking this interview baton and I'm throwing it over to Steve. Actually, I'm going to hand it to you. I'm not going to throw it over to you.
Yeah, because I'm really shit at catching.
And
so.
I know you're crap at that. So, Steve, you have the mic there. So just throw anything you want over in terms of questions to Dave and Zan.
Awesome. This first question, of course, is for Dave. I'm a huge fan of Dash, and it's been quite a long time since issue number 5. I'm so excited for issue number 6 to close out the story, and of course for the final collection with the additional material and all that to get more of the characters that I really enjoy. So because it's been a while, could you sort of give us just a quick, high points of what you've been sort of working on in the meantime between 5 and 6?
Yeah, sure. So the comic has kind of come out a little sporadically, indie comics. So what I've been doing since I went back to school. I just graduated, got my MFA, and writing.
Congratulations.
So I got my MFA at Point Park University in writing for the stage and screen, which has been kind of taking up like so much of my time. I'm also a theater director and a playwright too. So I think in the time between that, I'd done like one production. I think I'd done in between, but I haven't had like a whole lot of time to do anything because of just school and writing. So that's kind of what I've been up to. That's what I've been up to.
Well, I'm just really excited that you were able to work on your MFA and to graduate. I think that was pretty cool. I know that you've also been doing just a lot of writing here and there as well for the stage. Are there any projects or any big projects coming up after Dash that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I theater wise, because of the world, theater is shut down.
Yeah, sadly.
Like my performance is, I actually had and it's rough because it's a whole I'm a very small part of a huge industry that's just no one's working right now. It's very, very tough. It's very heartbreaking, especially when you just kind of look at the numbers and it's not good. I had a play set to be done in the fall and got kind of canceled because but I did the one play I did develop kind of it's almost like a sister companion to Dash in a way. I doing research on Dash, right? That time period, it was not good to be an out queer person in 1940. Like you could do jail time, a lot of jail time, and I had come across all of these really, really kind of just heartbreaking stories of these people who just kind of met and were in the middle of discovering each other, and they end up doing up to 20 years in jail, and that's just heartbreaking. So I ended up writing a play about this true story of these guys who used to hold these parties in this cabin it was in California still, but it was kind of off the beaten path, and it was my first almost musical. There's a lot of music in it. It's not musicals per se, but there's a lot of music in it. And that's I'd always wanted to tell that story, and I finally managed to be able to do it last year. In fact, our performance was a year ago today, our final performance of it. So that's something else I've done in that time period. But yeah, I've been really in the 40s and the 30s.
Well, that's cool. And that's what actually one of the awesome things about Dash specifically is that it feels very authentic, and a lot of how it's set and the character interactions and the language being used. Obviously, Dash being out is probably it would be a very rare situation.
It was
period.
Yeah, it was super rare, not uncommon. There you hear there's a great book, and I have it here. The last time I was on your podcast, I couldn't remember the name of the book, so I get that. It's a Bohemian Los Angeles and the Making of Modern Politics by Daniel Horowitz, and this is where I got a lot of my research. And like we talk about like a lot of like what like Stonewall, like there wasn't really what was life before that. There was a lot of life before that. It's just not recorded because people would just like if they were caught or discovered by their families, that they would just just throw out all the letters and pictures and everything. Where they didn't keep track of it. There's one story in here of like these two guys who were together for like 10 years and then they broke up, but like they didn't know anybody else. They said just because you didn't, nobody was out. But there were people, but like, and I kind of thought this, like what was lower than a homosexual in 1940? A private investigator. So so he's kind of got like he's the person his laundry's been like his dirty laundry's been all over the front page, so now he's looking at everybody's dirty laundry, and which is actually kind of get into a lot of that in the new story.
Awesome. Cool. Well, and now I'm gonna throw that same question actually over to Zan as well. What other projects have been coming up with Northwest Press, especially now that over the past several months, comics has been pretty much on hold until just very recently?
Yeah, I kind of stopped worrying too much about comics. I have a bunch of things that are kind of on the slate, ready to kind of be developed and continue with. But because we kind of work on a Kickstarter pre-sale model, I just didn't feel comfortable asking people to like buy, come help us publish this comic book. I mean, I know a lot of people out there really want some things to go on, so they can have them in their lives. And finally, it came to the point where it had been long enough. We did do a small project, which you might have seen, called Pride Postcards, which was just a way to get people, like for a small amount of money, they could actually we would send postcards to people they loved for them. And we did this bulk contract to do it. So it was very cheap for us. And we got about 1,000 postcards sent out all over the country. And I'm still waiting for the blanks to come for people who got a set. So they're coming, don't worry. But that was the first kind of foray back into doing a Kickstarter. And it was a small dollar thing. But doing books is a little more pricey. So I'm really happy. I mean, I knew that Dash was, people like it when they see it. A lot of people haven't heard of it yet, but people do like it when they see it. And I knew that it was going to be well received. I was not prepared to be halfway through funding, much more than halfway through funding on the third day. So yeah, I'm very happy. I'm hoping that this, if it goes, if it does really well, because of the way I've set up the budget, it'll be great. It'll be great for all the artists who are doing work for it. It'll be great for royalties for Dave and the artists. Yeah, it'll be a rising tide that lifts all boats. And hopefully I'll be able to I've been donating some books to stores in the area, trying to just say like, if you need something, like it's not much, but we can give you some quick comics. So maybe we'll be able to gift some to stores that have bought our books in the past, just something to kind of like, to say, do something nice for people. But yeah, I'm really happy that this is going to be the first kind of big project for our 10th anniversary. So yeah.
That's right, 10th anniversary. It's awesome. Well, actually, so I don't bogart this completely. Let's see, who should I shoot it over to? How about Bryan? I'll hand it off to Bryan.
Well, all right. So Zan, was this the first Was this the one you were talking
No,
about?
that was his second book.
Okay, so I don't have the first one, and now
It's
I need to.
called Helene and Camille.
Okay.
It's based on an erotic Victorian novel from 1893.
Okay, now I definitely need to get a
And
PDF.
it is super racy, and it's got lots of wieners in it, and
Go on.
and it's pretty intense. It's a book that was actually written anonymously by it is most likely believed to be Oscar Wilde and his circle of pals in London, and they wrote it in French and they published it in Paris so that they wouldn't be traced back to them, and they printed 200 copies, I think it was.
Oh wow! And
So it's been kind of an underground classic for like since the 50s, 60s.
and John did this, and is this still some? Is there a PDF or is there a physical?
We still have some copies of the original.
Really?
I have a warehouse that I'm able to just keep, at least some of the books on hand, so people can still buy them in print.
Excellent.
We did a run, I think, of 2,000 copies or something like that, and they've just kind of trickled out over the years. But yeah, that was the first one, and he'd been working on it for like 8 years, and he was just pouring himself into it, and it's such it won a Lander Literary Award for erotica right out of the gate. It was just it was a great way to get involved in publishing, a great person to get involved with. So also about the queer history, I read a book which I thought was really fascinating because I used to live in Chicago, called The Boys of Fairy Town, which is all about queer life in Chicago before the 60s, going back to like the turn of the century. And so it's interesting to watch attitudes change because, back in the early part of the 1900s, there wasn't a whole lot of homophobia because people didn't understand that people could be, a certain way and not another way. And they just kind of figured that people messed around and did whatever and didn't really care too much about people wanting to live their lives the way they did. And so it wasn't until, it started to calcify and get opposition growing to it that it started to become much more dangerous and much more, persecuted. But I think it's definitely interesting for people. If you're interested in gay history, I'd recommend that book because it shines a whole different light on what it was like to be a queer person. A lot of folks who did drag, a lot of folks who lived as women who were men, might be what we'd call trans people today, but in the day they were just fairy boys. But it's interesting to see what could have been, if people had not got their heads so far stuck up their asses.
That's very awesome. I need to. I have a collection of tabs going right now from you two, so I appreciate that. There's lots of reading time in quarantine, so this is all good. So let me go back to Dave here. I wanted to talk to you about your artists because you started this project with Delia, Gable, and that was the first 4 issues, correct?
Yeah, well, Delia's the co-creator of it too. So
okay.
So we're co-creators.
So co-creator and the artist on the first 4 issues. And her art style is fantastic. I think I don't want to spoil too much. I think we're trying to keep things sort of vague for people who have not read this yet, so I won't spoil anything. But the love interest, who, oh my gosh, Plink, right? Yeah. We can say the love interest, Plink.
Yeah.
I always was so taken by the way Delia conveyed his features, like something really adorable about it, and in a very sexy way that I would never think of, and very specific, I think, in sort of a cartoony style too. Mm-hmm. So I love that, and I love seeing Vinnie Rico. Seeing the way he has taken the writing, the artist duties on and carried that, I really was impressed seeing issue 5, just going back recently actually and reading it again, seeing that the style carries through. So I'm interested in both how is it like working with each of those artists, and also talk maybe a little bit about the baton passing, because it sounds like Delia was and is still involved in helping keep that continuity.
So yeah, the when we when I first kind of developed the story, Delia was introduced to me by my friend Sarah, who is the big inspiration for the character of Cindy in the book. So we had worked on it for like a year and a half before we ended up pitching it to Zan, and I think it was like another year until it was published, and then we worked like the 4 issues, and not only did she she did all of the art, and then all of the lettering as well. So she was shouldering a lot of the book, and then there's a lot of stuff that happened. She ended up moving from New York to Tacoma, which that's where she is right now. Very close to Zan, and then there's just a lot of stuff, and she really kind of needed to take a big step back. It was hard for us because we put so much so much of us into it. But I had discovered I went looking for someone not only who could kind of not necessarily match her style, but like complement her style. And I found Vinnie because it was my friend Eric Kalicki. Do you know guys? He's done like a lot of really wonderful like work. And he was doing a book. I believe it was called Fake. It was Fake Empire. And I loved I loved Vinnie's style, and I was like, this complements Delia so much. So I ran it by Delia. Delia loved them. Delia kind of they had a whole kind of like email kind of meeting about this. Delia kind of showed him how she does the coloring, because he does all the coloring as well. And he's just the most like sweet, enthusiastic guy, and he's so like, every conversation I have with him, he just thanks me so much for being able to work on the project. I'm like, thank you for being so awesome. And what's really cool about issue 5 is Delia has penciled the first couple pages, and then he inked them and colored them. So it wasn't just like, like a big, it was a very smooth transition, I felt. And I'm really, and Delia and I have been talking a lot more, especially because of this. And today we just announced that she's going to be doing two portraits as a rewards for the Kickstarter. She might be doing something else, but we haven't announced it yet for the collection. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So it's I have like, my heart is very full for both of them, and especially now because the Kickstarter has just done. Like Zan said it, but it totally exceeded my expectations. I didn't expect to be like way more than 50% funded at this point, 2 or 3 days into it. So, and all of us who were part of it were kind of blown away by it too.
Well, there's such a hunger for content right now, and especially with sort of a queer renaissance happening, both with gays and lesbians and our trans community. It's amazing, actually, for those of us who've been around for a while to see this. Like, I mean, all of us have been around for a while. Maybe Steve or Caleb, maybe the least, but still, like, most of us have been around and it's so amazing. All this queer content, all of these great Kickstarter, crowdfunded, and some traditional publishing. So I wanted to just quickly, Zan, I know you've done a little bit of both, sort of the crowdfunded and then the traditional. Obviously, you're still working with, Diamond to put things out there and previews and whatnot. Right now, given the state of the industry, I'm asking for a hot take on where you see, your baby bear. I'm interested in you as a publisher. Like, what is your hot take on the current climate with Diamond and DC, parting ways, and with digital taking on a bigger role? Where do you see what you're doing with queer comics, in another 10 years?
Well, the thing is that when you start in a business that you love but you don't know yet, you don't. There's good things and bad things about this. The good things are that you don't know what you're not supposed to be able to do, and so you just do what makes sense to you. But then the downside is that the things that are pretty obvious to people who've tried, that you do or don't do, and it would be nice to know those things ahead of time. But there's not a whole lot of mentoring. There's not a whole lot of kind of like communal wisdom about publishing. It's everyone usually starts from scratch, but it's kind of like queer relationships. Like a lot of things that are great about queer relationships are that you don't have a lot of roadmap, and so you build the relationship that works for you and your partners. And so it's got positives and negatives. I tried to kind of come in and do what I thought was kind of like the normal publisher stuff. So did try to hook up with Diamond, and they've actually been very good to work with. They, by their own rules, I should have been stricken from their catalog years ago because our numbers have never been amazing, but they are consistent. And we do have kind of a really loyal fan base, and we're, I think that we're part of a wave, and I think it's good to have us there as kind of like a crest of that wave, or like maybe just like the beginning of the wave. But they've been good to work with. They're not a major source of our sales, but it's good to be there. It's good to be seen. Like they've featured us a lot of times. They've kind of gone out of their way to help us. But I always did digital at the same time as we did the print books. That's just seemed obvious to do. And I don't have a glass of water. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for people to sell directly to their readers if they're small presses. But one of the things I've learned over the years is that being a publisher, like I have all these skills in production and lettering and design and typography and outreach and promotion and all that kind of stuff, and like proofing proofs and talking to the printer and doing all that stuff. I'm discovering that there's people who are artists and they are writers and they are creative people that shouldn't have to know how to do all this stuff. They should, it detracts from the time that they really need to spend on creating amazing artwork. And so I think there'll always be a place for people who bring skills to the table that facilitate creative work. So publishers who do that, I think, are absolutely necessary. And I think that most of the publishers I've met have been small publishers, and that's definitely what they do. They're always the kind of people who, like, they know about how to do things. They want to help people get their work in front of people. And we have to do more projects, because when I do a Kickstarter, I might make $1,000 or $2,000 when all is said and done, because everything gets spent. Where our budgets are pretty tight. So I'm really happy that the artists always make money, even if I don't. But I just do it because I like to be seen. I like to help other people be seen. I like to have it be a good experience and have them maybe go on to do other work and get jobs at amazing companies. And like I had people have been in my anthologies and then gone on to be things that are far more amazing than what they were doing with me. Like Sasha Velour was in our queer anthology. Steve Orlando had a piece in Anything That Loves. Just people have, I wouldn't say that they got their start with me by any stretch, but I'm able to work with people who are starting and kind of help them feel out what they want to do. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that the industry is going to be, it's probably going to be multi-pronged. There are people who do just digital work, just like they always have, and it'll be more encouraged, I guess, because of the COVID pandemic. But I think people always will want a beautiful object of art, an art object. So I'll still keep doing print books, and as long as there are stores, I will keep giving them steeper and steeper discounts to buy the books and sell them, because I want them to survive and thrive.
I was totally trying to find the Sasha story here, because I think we've talked about it on the show, but I actually got to have her sign it, and I talked to her about it for a little bit. And
the story is called Sasha Velour Goes to Walmart.
That's right. Oh my God, I can't find it at all.
She turns a homophobe into a unicorn.
Oh, there it is. I found it. But yeah, for people who are out there who like only know Drag Race and they're like, what is queer comics? You know, one of the season 10, 9? I don't remember what season she was. 10. Like, you know, she did comics before she was, you know, RuPaul famous. So so great. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I found it. And there it is. But yeah, no. So Zan, I love you so much. I love that you do this stuff because there is literally like what, maybe a few other people doing queer comics.
There are a lot more.
Oh, there are more now. Good.
Yeah, I mean, we started doing Prism back in 2003, and at that time it was there was kind of a '90s wave, there were kind of indie, gay indie comics that was kind of going short and ebb. And we were kind of on the upswing of a new wave of people doing web comics and doing, you know, in small press stuff. But now there's just, I mean, when you consider the fact that mainstream comics have caught up to representation of the indies in a lot of ways, there's just so many great stuff out there from big companies, small companies, and everything in between. Yeah, I'm just happy that I'm around. I think that by no stretch of the imagination am I like the only one doing it, and I think that's wonderful. I really love that.
Well, it's definitely good to have an indie publisher because, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of great mainstream representation. Oh, yay! Look at that. Oh, fantastic. But yeah, awesome. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to pass the baton on to Caleb, who is over there on whatever.
Yeah, it's always weird because we're in different spots on the screens.
Yeah.
So, number one, I mean, thank you both for doing what you do because, like Zan, you said, as much as you like to help people to be seen, you have us readers who really like to see ourselves in comics. And for a kid like me who grew up out in rural middle of nowhere, who thought comics existed within the realm of Marvel and DC, and who didn't see myself in a comic until I was an adult, I appreciate it. Like, I really do appreciate that. But it makes it even better when a comic is within a genre that I absolutely love, which is detective stories. And I love comics. I mean, we've spoken about this before. I love comics that kind of wear their heart on their sleeve a little bit, and I mean that in the best of ways. I think that's one of the best compliments I can give. And so for you to have a detective story with the main character named Dash, to really invoke the name of Dashell Hammett, that speaks to my heart. But when I was reading, reading what I've read, I haven't finished the series yet, obviously, but I can't wait to. It got me thinking of another detective story that really focuses on a minority community, and that's the work by Walter Mosley, Devil in a Blue Dress. Because what those books did is they take a detective story, and in Walter Mosley's case, it focuses on the African American community, the Black community, for a largely white audience. And as I was reading it, I was like, oh, there are some of these same tricks, these same narrative craft elements it's a mystery within a mystery, because just like that book was geared towards a white audience, whether or not it was, I don't think geared towards is the right way to put it, but a lot of white people read that book. Did you focus on that with the idea that this could be a mystery within a mystery? This is a look at gay culture for people who might not be gay, who want a murder mystery, who want that kind of that story.
It's really cool that you just brought up Devil in a Blue Dress. I was just talking to a good friend of mine on Twitter about like how, like, so it was Denzel in the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how like he was like, his point was like, we felt like we got robbed of more of that. Like there should be more Easy Rollins movies. Like there should have, like, because it's so good. It's one of the best noir movies out there, and
it absolutely is. It's one of my and like I said, if you haven't read the book,
I haven't. No, I should do that. And I was late to the game in it. A teacher recommended it in school, and I guess I hadn't it went past me, and then it was so good. Yes, there was a lot of, I mean, part of it for me was like, I didn't know the queer history. I didn't know those mysteries, and I didn't know those stories. So it's this whole book is like a love letter to things I love. you were talking about wanting to see yourself, and this is the story that I wanted to read that wasn't being told. And our first issue came out in 2014. I started developing it in 2012. The landscape of like queer comics has really changed in that time, just like with the past 8 years. So that's
queer culture in general has shifted so far in 6 years.
There's definitely an element of it of there's kind of 2 layers of it. But I wanted to write it for an audience for like that anyone could pick it up and could relate to it, you know, like because there's we deal with kind of like, you know, grief, and everybody can kind of relate to it in every, you know, in some kind of a way. Everyone has a person that they love that they don't know if they can completely trust, but they love them anyway. Right. You know, there's a lot of everyone has like, you know, I see the story is a big part of the story is about friendships and how, like, you know, your friends can get you through really difficult times. More than anything, that's kind of that's one of the biggest themes that I've been writing about. But yeah, that's kind of all I've been, you know, kind of trying to pour into the book, and hopefully people are getting out of it. So thanks for thanks for asking that.
Oh no, you're welcome. Like I said, the I don't know if you'd call it the mystery genre, but the detective novel, the detective stories are some of my favorite things to work with, especially when they're nuanced, when they're layered, when, you know, you're doing what Dashell Hammett and Easy Rollins, what Walter Mosley did, and you're hiding a culture within a story that allows a large group of people. I mean, it's kind of like Bill says at the introduction of every show. You know, we're a couple of, well, for my case, not so hairy, but you know, heavy homos. But you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen. I think that's the way you get those messages across, and you build bridges to places that it was really hard to build before. And you know, just because we're all dropping like historical gay books, there is a memoir called My Queer War, which they are the letters and the memoirs of a gay soldier in World War II. Yeah, you should go check that out. So a guy that I consider to be like my dad is a Vietnam vet. He's gay. He was a Marine in Vietnam, and so I saw this in the bookstore, and I'm like, oh, like let me get that for him and let him read it. And you know, he just crying when he was telling me about it. It was amazing. And it's not necessarily a happy story, as you might imagine, but you know, so today in queer literary class, check out that also. But I love the little craft elements that you put in there. How did you structure that from issue to issue? So when I think about a detective novel, you know, there are peaks and valleys in a detective novel, but they work throughout the whole book. How did you pace that, knowing that you were going to do a 6 issues that eventually leads up to a crescendo, but still has those turns that detective novels have?
At the end of every issue, everything kind of like the stakes kind of get bigger, and the kind of revelations get like more nuts. Like issue 6 is probably the most nuts issue, because like everything is now like out in the open, and like you kind of see, like, you know, like it's a supernatural noir. So you like our supernatural elements are right on display, and it may be our most gory issue.
I want to interject that it gets really, really nuts. I mean, I cannot overstate how nuts it gets. I was not ready for how nuts it gets. It's amazing, but it's nuts. I mean, okay. Sorry. So nuts.
Yeah, so I mean, people haven't seen it yet, so I'm still a little, like, you know, but and that's really attributed to Vinnie. He really kind of took some of these things that I had in the script, and he went there. Not to not answer your question, but there is a moment in the script that I wrote where, and we actually previewed the page today on the Kickstarter, where I written, it's like they uncover something, Dash and Sal, and it's like they react to it like kind of like Scooby-Doo, and that's like as a joke, And then so kind of drew it that way. And I was like, you know what? It's the ultimate issue. So I'm like, let's just leave it in. So
it's charming. I mean, it's so fun. I love the blend of the kind of the more I mean, it's not realist, but it's kind of trying to be serious.
Yeah.
Blending that with a really playful style, it works really well. I like it.
And like Delia had hinted that, but when he picked it up, he kind of like really ran with it. Really ran with it. Sorry, I didn't.
Oh no, you're good. I was just gonna say, Raina Telgemeier does something similar in putting those serious elements with kind of cartoony visuals in there, but it works so well. So Zan, aside from getting finding these gems on the floor of a comic convention, how does the approach with Northwest Press go? How do you guys? I mean, where are you finding these individuals, and what are you looking for? And by that I mean, in college I interned with a small press literary publisher, and read dozens and dozens and dozens of manuscripts, and some of them were great, but as a small press publisher you can only publish, in our case I think maybe 6 novels a year.
Yeah.
How do you what do you look for in the work that you put out?
I went through a period of the last few years where it was difficult. I was doing it full time for about 5 years. I left a day job in 2013 and did it full time until 2018. I loved it, but it's not a gold mine. Let's just say that. I was working really hard. I was having a blast. I was traveling everywhere. I was visiting all these people all over the world. Did shows in Munich, did shows in Canada, did shows everywhere, and got it. I mean, maybe a little burned out. Maybe my only guiding principle in the work that I pick is that I want it to be something that is important for some reason. I've gotten a lot of pitches from people who draw very nicely, who are telling a fun story. But I don't. It's not anything that doesn't already exist. It's not. It feels too light. I can't see the reason why it has to come from this person and this story. It doesn't seem like it's essential. And it's kind of hard to nail down what that ultimately means. But the result of that is I get works like I published a piece by Yves Navant called 13, The Astonishing Lives of the New Romantics, which is this batshit crazy space opera, dystopian, gay, body horror romance. That I'd never seen anything like that before. It was like Egon Schiele meets gay, meets like queer as folk, I don't know, something. Like that's it. Like I know when I see it that there's something that is unique about this. I definitely think that that also goes for the people who are telling the stories. Like, how many opportunities have they had to tell a nuanced story that goes really in depth about what it's like to be them? The most honest things, the most personal things, are the things that are going to be the most universal for any reader. If it's real, then everybody's going to understand it because we're all human beings. So that's the kind of stuff I'm at for. It doesn't really give much of a roadmap for somebody to pitch to me. But I would say if you are interested, if anybody out there is interested in sending something, just don't go overboard. Do your work. Make sure you're doing it for you. And then share it and say, hey, I'm doing this. What do you think? I'm always happy to provide feedback, even if it's something I'm not going to publish. But mostly, if you want to be a comics creator, you have to make comics. So make comics.
Yeah.
And then once you've made a comic, say, I made a comic, and I'll look at it.
Can I just want to chime in right there? So so when I pitched to Zan when you're not supposed to at San Diego, how I did it. I went to the Prism booth and I literally asked. I said, "Is there anyone here who can give me a pitch review?" and they brought Zan out, and I had we hadn't really heard of each other, and he looked at it and he was like, oh, I published this, like kind of like very quickly, and I was like, what? And it was like, but he's like, you can go pitch to all of these people. He said, pitch this to all of these people. He's like, you don't just pitch it to me. And it was a very interesting experience because I've seen people pitch to you, and I've been at my like very like lowest at cons, and I'm like, oh no, I suck, and then you're like, no, look how quickly I took your book and all these people giving me stuff. Yeah. So it's always interesting too.
Well, I always tell people, I saw Alison Bechtel speak. She came to Comic-Con for the first time as like a ultra guest of honor because she had like the biggest book in the world, back in 2007 or something like that. And maybe it was 2010. I don't remember. It was. She owns the world now. But she did a spotlight panel and she talked about the process of putting together Fun Home, which was the big breakout graphic novel that she released. And she was talking to the Firebrand Books had gone out of business. That was the publisher that she worked with. And so she got an agent for the first time and said to the agent, well, like who are the other niche gay publishers that we can go to? And the agent said, why don't you pitch to, HarperCollins, Random House, like go start at the top. Like if you have great work, demand to be heard by big people. So I think that everybody should do that. Like if you're doing work that you love, by all means, I would love to see it. Come by, show it to me. But aim high. Like if it fits really well at Image or fits really well at Marvel, do it. Go and get make an appointment at a show for a review. I had a great experience with an editor at DC back in the day, before I was doing Prism stuff, trying to do writing. And he actually, had me send some samples, made an appointment, went to see him in the DC offices in New York. Just try to, meet people, get to know them, share your work with them. There are people out there who definitely want to help you be your best artistic self. So start at the top.
Dave, you had mentioned your theatrical background, and I know we talked about this in the past. A couple of years ago, I saw a regional production of Look Back in Anger. And while I'm watching it, I'm there and I'm just taken aback by how much of an influence John Osborne was on Grant Morrison. And I know that there are some circumstances where there are comic book creators that do take an influence. Probably the most prominent one, maybe not so much in dialogue, but at least in three-story structure, David Mamet on Bendis. With Dash and with whatever comic writing you've done, is there anything you've taken from influences in theater?
Well, Dash was actually the first comic I ever tried to write. And no. but the dialogue, like just writing dialogue and having directed dialogue for so long that I could fill a panel up very quickly, and I learned I had to cut it down. But that kind of led to like when we had our first when the first issue came out, like here in Philly, we had like a launch party, and we did a live stage like a radio play, and like all the actors were dressed up as the characters, and we had original music, all of which you can hear on our Kickstarter video. So we were finally able to kind of go back, and the guy who played Dash came in and he did the narration for it. So it's in some way, Delia actually said it to me at the time. She's like, you had to turn this into a play, didn't you? But it was so fun. It was so fun. It was a good time. We had a great house, and it was a good time. But so I hope that answered your question. I
am muted. That dastardly mute button. I think if you did take a few steps back, there probably are a few things that you may have been influenced by, and especially in terms of back and forth dialogue, which I have to say in some issues of Dash is exquisite. So maybe it is there. Zan, I just wanted to talk to you, and again, in regards to Northwest Press, there's a number of books that we've talked about on the show, whether it's Unpacking or Al-Qaeda Super Secret. There's been a lot of Northwest Press books. And one thing that I think is unexplored terrain for a lot of people, which does kind of surprise me because there have been some very prominent creators immediately coming to mind, Scott Snyder and Tom King, that have come out of comic book influenced prose. And I am specifically talking about the Lavender Menace, Tales of Queer Villainy. And I was just wondering if you could just give us, and again, you have a story in here as well as a writer. I just was wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about this particular book and how that came about.
That was a funny story. That was originally going to be published by a different publishing house, and I was just a contributor to it. And it's Tom Cardamone, who's the editor of the series, also a writer in it as well. And he's done a lot of great work. He's done multiple Lambda Literary nominations. He's amazing. When that fell through, he said, "Well, do I know any other publishers?" I'm like, so that was the only prose book that we did. And I tried to kind of bring the same design sense and the same kind of audience, obviously, to it. It fit very well, especially because it was kind of a comic booky prose element already. I mean, it was a very comic booky kind of thing. Got Joe Phillips, amazing illustrator, to do the cover. It came together really well. And we did a follow-up to that, Dangerous Women. Oh, not Dangerous Women. That was the original title, Absolute Power, where Erica Friedman was the editor, and it was all women and non-binary folks, femme identifying binary folks, non-binary folks, not men, and it was great. I mean, I did get a little flack from people because the first one was called Lavender Menace, which is very much identified with queer women's movement stuff in the 60s. And so I had to do a follow-up, and I had to kind of rectify that. But I don't know, like I'm so drawn to comics as a medium for very immediate communication, and they're such an equalizer. I learned all my vocabulary words reading Chris Claremont X-Men comics. They got me like really excited about reading, and so I went from those into prose books, and I haven't really come back into prose books. I keep buying books thinking, oh well, I'm good. This one I'm really gonna. But I read a lot more nonfiction for prose stuff, kind of influence stuff, and I'm doing my own writing now. I'm doing trying to develop. I have a bunch of short story ideas. I had a dream that was kind of a cross between the Postcards from the Edge and Her. And the ideal leads for the movie version would be Carrie Fisher right before her death, and Anne Hathaway in Devil Wears Prada. They'd be the perfect people to play these parts. So I love prose and I love stories. Like stories are the main thing to me. But comics are where it's at as far as publishing, I think. Yeah.
Hey, Bill, I have two questions from the chat before I don't know.
Sure.
Jump in there. Umberto is asking if either of you are familiar with To Cast a Deadly Spell, and if that had any connectivity or influence, or are you guys familiar with that? I'm not familiar with that movie myself. To the Google.
I was going to say, like, judging by the faces, I'd say no.
Well,
cast.
Evidently, that's
Moore, Clancy Brown. Oh my gosh!
I think I've seen this.
Umberto is a friend of mine from Orlando, and he has really good taste in things. So I'll definitely have to check it out now.
Yes,
it's a 1991 film with, looks like we've got Fred Ward, David Warner, Julianne Moore, Clancy Brown.
Looks wonderful. I swear, I think I've seen. I'm really terrible about books I've read and things I've seen unless I write lists of them down. Like I'm terrible.
100%.
Nominated for a Cable Ace Award for Best Score.
Oh, who did the score? Does it say?
I don't know.
Oh, now I really have to look it up. The other question is from James Figueredo. First of all, gratuitous plug for Bill's Crime Fighter Inquiry. He's asking about that property's future. And then for Zan, question: have you published work that was originally a webcomic, and would you consider publishing a webcomic as print and digital?
Short answer: yes. I published the Capitol Hillbillies collection, which is originally a webcomic, and then also did newspaper strip, which is kind of like the old school, back when webcomics were printed. The Ethan Green collection from Eric Orner. So yeah, I think that's a great place. It's a little, and also even a waste of time. Another one that was also webcomics.
Oh yeah, yeah. How could we forget that? That's
so yeah. I mean, I it's a little different. I mean, comics. I think they work best as a multi-page medium because you have like the tension that you build, and you have page turn and the reveal, and like there's all kinds of ways you can use the page, and you design a story and you draw people through it, and there's stuff like that you don't get through strips. But a lot of strips these days are more serialized than before. They're not all funky Winker Bean. So I would say absolutely.
I'll just quickly talk about Crime Fighter Inquiry. Unfortunately, the artist and co-creator Mark wasn't interested in going further. Maybe someday I'll have a windfall and I'll be able to pay an artist that I would want on the project. But I'll get in touch with Jim. I'll send him some scripts. It's just so he knows where it heads.
Oh, good.
Okay, so Steve, do you have anything else for these fine gentlemen?
No, I'm just more than anything, I'm really excited to see the conclusion of the story arc here with Dash number 6 coming up in the next couple of months. And then, of course, for anybody who is watching or who's listening, please go out and support the Kickstarter on this. As Dave and Zan have already mentioned, in the first couple of days, they've already gotten about 50%, a little bit more than 50% to their goal. But, there's still plenty of time. So definitely come and support it.
Bryan, do you have anything else for them?
I just have a very leading, possibly not exciting, I don't know, question for Dave, which is, do you have any more Dash stories or in this world that you might someday want to tell?
Yes. And there's a lot of them, and there may be a hint of that in this graphic novel, where we're going next. Going back to hinting that there may be something new from Delia in this as well.
Very excited.
Awesome.
Leave him wanting more.
And Caleb, do you have anything for Dave or Zan?
Just that Zan's shirt keeps looking at me like it wants me. No, while you're on the interwebs and you're checking out that Kickstarter, make sure you swing by Northwest Press. They've got some awesome shirts, speaking of shirts, and an incredible catalog. They're you can order it straight from your phone, like somebody might be doing right now as I keep looking away. I'm not shopping, but yeah, great website, and thank you both. Like I said, you put the comics out there that we can see ourselves in, and that's important. That's incredibly important. As fun as they are, and all the amazing stories, the fact that there is representation for a wide variety of people that don't have that or hadn't had that in the past, and you make it available and accessible is awesome.
Hear, hear.
Happy to do it.
All right. Well, then that leads me right into the last part of the pitch there. So, Zan, if people want to access that Northwest Press catalog or contact you on the interwebs, where would they go?
Well, they might go to northwestpress.com. And actually, whenever we do a Kickstarter, it's always northwestpress.com/Kickstarter. So it'll take you right to the campaign, or just go and see, there it is. Yeah. I have to redesign my website because it's things in the comics world have changed quickly, and things in the web design world have changed quickly too. It's about time for a refresh. I'm thinking of doing something radically different. So we'll see.
Awesome.
To be continued.
And Dave, how about you? What are your contact points?
I have a website, daveebersole.com. We also have dashthecomic.com, which also needs to be updated. Those are the two places you can get me at.
Awesome.
I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah. We're all over the place.
Find me there. Yeah, find me there. I love to hear feedback. It's, whether you liked it or even if you didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
I love to hear it. So.
All right. Well, we'll put that out there for you. Dave, Zan, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to be talking about a few comics that we've been reading recently. You're more than welcome to stick around, or if you have any reason that you need to bail, we completely understand. But that's what we're going to be doing. So do you guys want to stick around?
I might want to get a glass of water.
Okay.
I didn't plan ahead. But I'll turn my video off and I might pop back in.
Oh, awesome.
Cool.
All
right. Okay, great, Dave. That's awesome. So my lucky charm in terms of this roundtable stuff is always Steve, so I go to him first. So Steve, why don't you talk about a book that you're enjoying?
Well, because again, it is Pride Month. I wanted to bring up another queer story that I've been reading, and actually one that has a little bit of a pedigree with it, with one of the contributors, and is also from one of the big two, which, again, if you've been reading a lot of the DC graphic novels for younger readers, there's been a lot of representation that they've been able to put out, and that the creators, they're encouraging the creators to have. And my stack is almost as big as Bill's there, because he's really encouraged me to keep reading them, and I love them. They're great.
No, it's been a very, very good program.
Yeah, I'm surprised, because usually I don't read a lot of YA type books, but these have actually had a lot for me to enjoy as an almost 40-year-old dude. So the latest one, one of the latest ones, was You Promised Me the Ocean, You Brought Me the Ocean, which is a sort of retelling of the origin of Aqualad. And this is the Aqualad who is the son of Black Manta. Spoilers, if anybody didn't know that. The author on this is Alex Sanchez, and the artist is Julie Moreau, who you might remember from Blue is the Warmest Color. So this was Blue is the Warmest Color was their book that actually spawned a pretty popular movie as well. And what's really interesting is that their art mixed with Alex's words really does have it really ends up being a wonderful combination. So the basic story of this is, again, like I mentioned, a retelling of the origin of Aqualad, the newer Aqualad, the next generation Aqualad. He's living alone with his mother in Arizona, New Mexico, completely in the middle of the desert, kind of very far from ocean as you could possibly get. And his big ambition is to go to college in Miami where he can study oceanography. He lives next door to his best friend, Maria, who has a little bit more than friendship in mind with Jake. And of course, she doesn't realize, as we as the readers realize, that Jake is actually secretly gay. On top of that, he has another secret that he's not aware of just yet, but his scarring or markings that sort of cover most of his upper body are actually indicative of the powers that he has, the metahuman powers that he has hidden inside. And he gets to know the only other out gay kid in school, Kenny, and starts up a friendship with him. Kenny, of course, is a swimmer, so I guess he gets extra points for that. And he's also as interested in Jake as Jake is in him. And ends up in their first date, he ends up actually having his powers reveal themselves to save Kenny. That happens very early in the book. I don't want to spoil too much more, but just suffice to say that the relationship between Kenny, Maria, and Jake really grows very well in this book. I think it's very well written for a YA audience, but also somebody older would also get a lot out of it. The art is beautiful. Again, if you read Blue is the Warmest Color, one of the interesting things about one of the main characters is the hair color being blue. Kenny, of course, in this has blue hair. So I think Julie kind of wanted to put some continuity with her work in this one. So, but it is fun. I do recommend it. It's a pretty quick read and enjoyable, and hopefully there might be some more coming from Alex Sanchez and Julie Moreau in this series.
Awesome. Next DCBS box for me. Bryan, how about you?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So I was super excited to see one of our favorite writers, Mark Russell, post that he was doing a Marvel work, which is, I believe, his first Marvel work, about Captain America. But of course, with Mark, it's never just, on the face. It's never just the thing. So it is possibly easy to overlook. I don't know if I can get that in there without, because of course, currently, with the weird world that we're in, but also it's Marvel snapshots. You might overlook it. You might think, that's whatever. It's fine. But it is a great one and done, by Mark Russell, with artwork by the one and only Ramon Perez, who, as longtime listeners of the show know, I have an unhealthy obsession. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, thanks, Dave. Dave knows. We all know. All of us know. It's bad. It's bad. It's thing. But no, I love Ramon. I love his art. I'm so thrilled that he is back. That they're putting more of his stuff out, because I knew he had more Marvel work coming, and anyway. And then colors by Rico Renzi, who I completely forgot. I have met obviously at Heroes. Speaking of Heroes earlier, being he's out of Charlotte. It's a great team. I mean, honestly, a dream team here. And it's Captain America story that Cap is barely in, and in a fantastic way. It is set, I believe the way they discussed it and the way it fits, it's a like a story after one of the existing stories in continuity. So it's what happens after, I believe it's the Mad Bomb that goes off in New York City. I'm not familiar with that story as well. I need to go back and find that, but
yeah, it's the start of Kirby's run.
oh, wow.
The second time he did in the 70s. I think it's awful, but you might get a different.
Wait,
might get a different thing.
The original story or this one?
The original.
Okay. I
think Kirby in the 70s at Marvel is almost unreadable, but might have a different opinion.
I love Kirby, but who knows?
Enjoy. I will say though that if you did enjoy Remender's Captain America, there's a lot of connective tissue there. So it might be a little bit more in your wheelhouse than I'm providing for you.
That makes sense with certainly some of the things that's in there. So basically, if you're not familiar with that story, and again, I'm not, but it is a bomb that goes off, and it basically causes everyone to go mad in this radius of the bomb. That's all you need to know. You don't need to go back and dig in otherwise, but that's the start. And there is this fantastic storyline about a character who is relatively, unknown. This is a new character that Mark's created that gives you the really kind of like in this history of Marvels, the Alex Ross, Busiek, you get the, wait, was it Busiek or Wade? It was Busiek, right? That did Marvels?
Marvels was Busiek, yeah. Okay,
just making sure. Like that from the ground perspective of this event, and you kind of learn the side effect and the ramification of this terrible tragedy that becomes very personally manifested in this character's life. This young Black American trying to go to school, go to college, wants to go off and become an engineer, and so very technically savvy, and he has a very intense tragedy because of this event. And that tragedy shapes his destiny. And I'm not going to spoil the whole thing, but this story gives you a really great look at the outcome of this in a marginalized community. This outcome of this this terrorist activity in this city, but from a marginalized community perspective, person of color, Black young engineer, how that shapes his life, what that makes him do next, and it gives you also the superhero's perspective on that situation. So Cap is in the story, Falcon, Tony Stark. So it's all that era of Marvel. And God, there's some just beauty in the story and the outcome. It's not necessarily a rosy, happy ending, but it is firmly planted in, we need to listen more to our marginalized communities, and we need to uplift our our fellow men and everyone in our communities to achieve what they are destined to achieve in their own right. And all of the societal and all of the socioeconomic and all of the cultural disadvantages, are heightened by these kind of tragic events, as we're seeing right now with COVID-19. And seeing Captain America in a way that he's not perfect. Like he hits things. Like he's a hero, but he's a blunt instrument. And having that pointed out to him and seeing him sort of humbled and seeing then what he does next is really powerful in this moment. And it's great because the story was written a while ago. It's not a in response to the current events, but it is one of those odd synchronicities that just it makes your skin tingle and your hairs stand up when you feel those synchronicities with what's going on. So it's a one shot. It's one and done. Perez's art is fantastic, as it always is, and the colors are a perfect choice from Rico. They really complement the era that it's set and the style of that era, especially. I don't get a lot of Kirby from Ramon's art, and not knowing that it was a Kirby story, I got to go back now and kind of hold them up, against each other. But there are little traces of it. The Mad Bomb itself, I can see the Kirby direct influence there. But yeah, if you haven't checked this out, if it's off your radar, I can't speak for the rest of the series because I literally just picked this one up. But yeah, Marvel Snapshots, Captain America, that's what it looks like. You got to check it out. It's well worth your $3 or $4. Totally worth it.
Okay, Caleb, how about you?
So I have a bad habit of getting really excited about talking about a book to you guys and then finding a book the day of that just throws me completely off track. Like that always seems to happen. So I had a book that I was going to plan on talking about that came out last week, but then I found the book that I actually want to talk about this week, and it's a brand new book, kind of like Bryan. So if you haven't read it, there's nothing really to spoil, but it's called SOS Support Our Shops with a gorgeous cover by David Mack. I don't know if y'all can, if really comes through on the screen, but so I'm going to tell you what the book is, and then I'm going to tell you what the book is and what makes it super cool. One of the things that we all, that I think everybody who does a podcast, but Bill especially does, and has carried through Comic Book Bears Forever, is let creators kind of tell their origin story the first time they're on the show and stuff. And that's essentially what this book is. This book is a series of origin stories from some of the greatest comic creators, not all of, but some of the greatest comic creators that are out in the industry today, and it's published by Aftershock Comics. I don't know if you can see the back of the book, but it's kind of a who's who. There's Cullen Bunn, Steve Orlando, Jamie McKelvey, Stephanie Phillips, Phil Hester, Jerry Ordway's on this book, Rose Stein, and Ted Brandt, who are some newcomers to the industry that I absolutely love. Their book Crowded was awesome. Gordon Purcell, Guy Major, there's just a ton of them. And each of these stories is the writer's perspective on how they got their start in comics. And it opens up with Cullen Bunn and, being on a road trip with his family and having a little brother who is just kind of hyperactive and, just stuck in the car, and they go by a gas station. And he picks up a comic that he's starting to read, and he grabs the other one of the same title, but as they get in the car, he realizes he got number 13 and number 17, and he wants the rest of that story. So it leads him to a comic shop, and that's where he really found the magic. Something similar in Stephanie Phillips' story. She writes a story about this young girl who's in a store, kind of a comic shop full of guys. But the proprietor is also a woman, and she finds this kind of connective tissue with this person who helps her just fall in love with superhero comics. It was really neat because the Jamie McKelvey story in there, Jamie's not drawing it. Rose Stein's actually drawing it, and Ted Brandt does the work on it. Jamie writes it, and I'm not used to seeing Jamie in the writer's seat, but it kind of tells the story about how Jamie was not a quote-unquote comics guy. He did, he read a few comics as a kid, but he was an adult. He was a quote-unquote grown-ass man when he was, hanging out with the person that he was dating, and they were like, have you read Sandman? And he's like, no, what is this? And he gets handed a comic, and it blows his mind because he's never seen a comic like this. He's never seen what the medium can do, and so he goes to a comic shop and he picks up the trade, and the next week he comes up and picks up the second trade, and up through the ninth trade. And by the end of it, he's redeveloped his love of visual storytelling, and he starts drawing, and he goes on to become Jamie McKelvey. And that's the power of the medium. There's so many in here, and the stories, they're just like the stories we've heard. They're, oh, I was a kid and I found my first comic in a spinner rack, or, oh, I was walking down the street and I found a bag of comics that somebody had thrown out in the trash can, and I picked them up and read them because my family wouldn't let me have comics. Or I was a poor kid and I found them at the library. There's just so much of that in there, and it really speaks to, like, for me, who loves that aspect of what comics can do and what we as a culture can do for comics. It just made me really happy. Now that's why the content is cool. And I got to give a shout out. It would be terrible of me if I didn't. The heavy lifters of this book are Guy Major and Marshall Dillon, who did the majority of the colors and lettering throughout. There are very few stories that Guy Major didn't do the colors on, and that Marshall Dillon especially didn't do the letters on. So shout out to those guys. They did some work. All right. That's why the inside is cool. Now, here's why the outside is cool. The SOS support our shops. This wasn't in previews. This wasn't ordered and purchased by comic shops. Aftershock Comics sent a package of these for free to every Diamond account that they have access to. And I don't know for bigger shops, I don't know how they did it. If you just got 10 if you're a smaller one, and you got 110 if you were a bigger one. I don't know how they dispersed it. But they sent them on their own dime. They put this together to send to comic shops who have been shut down because of COVID. And the sticker price, I forget, let's see, I don't even know if it has it on here. I'm not sure what it rings up as. Probably $3.99, $2.99, whatever. 100% of that goes in the comic shops. None of it goes back to Aftershock. That's awesome. And it kind of speaks to what Zan was saying earlier with wanting, like, being able to, as a publisher, give back. And so as I was listening to him talk about that, I was like, oh, like that settles it. I'm definitely talking about this. That's what comics does. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about stuff that's just from Diamond, or you're talking about the industry and all of the insanity that's going on with the industry right now. When comics and comics people are going through something, we wrap our arms around each other. That's what I love about this culture. It's what I love about gay culture. It's what I love about comics culture. And that's what I loved especially about this book. And also, did I mention that gorgeous David Mack cover? Because it's the hotness. So go, if you can, go see if you can find it. I don't know if you can get it online. I have no idea if maybe Comixology has it and lets you pick where you send your stuff to. I don't know. That would be a cool aspect.
I just looked for it while you were talking about it. I was trying to buy it, and I couldn't buy it.
So you may have to actually go find your local comic shop, and if it's open. But there's just some really, really great stuff in there, and it's for a really good cause. And yeah, SOS from Aftershock. Go Aftershock. Rock and fucking roll. That's awesome.
The book that I want to talk about, again, I've been catching up with a lot of stuff because I'm not traveling for work, and the Regina pile of comic books is insane. A book I finally got to, we've already discussed the writer of this book among our choices, and this is a book that started life as a Vertigo project, but then the rights reverted to the author because of some controversies, and it found a home at Ahoy Comics. And the book I'm talking about in single issues, which I have, is Second Coming, which is written by Mark Russell with art by Richard Pace and some finishes by Leonard Kirk within the storyline. And it tells the story of a Superman analog named Sunstar. And the god that inhabits this universe is definitely the Old Testament dickhead god. And he decides, maybe mankind doesn't deserve to continue. So he, through a series of events, his son, Jesus Christ, comes back to Earth. But to help him out, God engages Sunstar to room with him. And though these are both one literally messianic and another messianic figure, they both have very different worldviews and very different perspectives about how to bring people to either justice or goodness. And like the best parts of the Bible, It is both sacred and profane. Sometimes, within the space of the same thought. It's actually a really quick read. You have the world building that takes place in here is really wonderful. The Lois Lane version of Sunstar's love interest, Sheila Sharp, is a really cool character. This is a little closer to the real world. So, of course, Sunstar is in a superhero group therapy. The version of Batman, which is Night Justice, is particularly pathetic. As of right now, he's the closest thing comic books has to a sure bet. And I really loved it, and I'm kind of kicking myself for waiting 6 months to read it. So that was my choice. Second Coming. Steve, keep me honest here. Have we ever talked about this on the show?
I think I have brought it up.
But it was very much in passing. We really didn't take a deep.
Yeah, no, definitely not a
yeah.
deep dive. Just sort of like, hey, Second Coming's out. Let's talk about Second Coming.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I love Ahoy Comics. I love the fact that they not only have a great way of celebrating the authors and their artists, but they also have a lot of prose in the back matter, and that sometimes is just as much fun to read as the comic story that's headlining.
Right.
But that specific for Second Coming. I know they don't have that in the trade, but if you do have a chance, and I think it should be still pretty much available to pick up the single issues, they do have the letters column, and reading some of the letters in there from readers and from people who are interested in the book, and the answers that Mark Russell provides, or at least the responses that Mark Russell provides, it's really great dialogue because obviously the subject matter is very sensitive for a lot of people. And Mark has the chops. I think the history with seminary, I think that can help answer some of that while still maintaining a pretty good sense of humor about it, and not allowing sort of things to go super confrontational, keeping some of it light.
I would argue that this is even more reverent than his Flintstones work was. So that was kind of the big controversy: is this Mark Russell just going to be poking the bear at Christianity? And he was extremely reverent to the religion and to the message of Christ. And as somebody who's not a Christian, but was raised Christian, I was incredibly impressed by just his honesty and his truth that he came out with.
No, definitely as a retired Catholic, there was a lot that I appreciated. Also, since Steve, you mentioned the back matter, this does have a short story by Audrey Ryer. Audrey is the daughter of my friends Sharon and Andrew. I've known her since she was 10 years old. And it's really cool to see her work in something like this. So Dave, Zan, are there any books that you're currently digging that you might want to talk about?
I can go because
cool.
So I don't know if you guys heard of Alienated from Boom.
Yes. Now it's ringing the bell. Yeah.
This is because I watched the show, so I had it right here. It's not normally something I would read, but my LCS comic book shop in Delaware, right over the line of PA. Shout out.
I was there. God, early March.
Were you?
Yeah.
Wow.
I went to a show at Chapel Street Players. I was there. It's a great shop. It's an amazing shop.
She's amazing. She carries my book. She's like they have a huge LGBTQ selection. They're amazing, but she has a tendency to come up and say like, read this. So I've learned to just be like, okay. It's about like 3 kids in high school, which already I'm like, it's not really like, I mean, okay. But what's cool about it is that they kind of come across this like space creature and like which joins all of their brains. And the 3 kids are all like named Sam, like in like some way, like there may be a nickname and whatnot. But it went in a way different direction than I thought it was. And the other 2 like issues, it's getting a lot darker than I thought it would. But it feels like very reactionary to our times, and a lot of this. I think the series was definitely written before we went into like a pandemic. But I'm curious to see where it goes. with that in mind. But yeah, this was not something this is not normally in my wheelhouse, but I'm enjoying the heck out of this. So that's what I got.
Awesome. Zan, how about you? Do you have anything?
I'm sure will be good that I do want to plug, which is Joe Glass's new project on Kickstarter. I'm gonna get the name wrong. Hold on a second. I backed it right away without even. I mean, I did look at it.
I think it's Glitter Vampires. Is it
Glitter Vipers?
Glitter.
Queer grindhouse graphic novel. It's basically like the queer revenge power fantasy that we all need sometimes. And I know that this is a primal thing because I've had almost not the same storyline, but the same kind of fantasy of like a pack of kick-ass queer characters beating the shit out of homophobes. So I am really looking forward to this. I think it's gonna be great. And also on the more goofy side of things, I read about the Green Lantern 100-page 80th anniversary special because they're retelling the Green Lantern origin with in the Golden Age with the new gay Alan Scott that they did during the whole New 52 Michigas. So I bought it just because I want to read it because I love. I mean, it's basically like Dash but with a ring. Because he's going to be, a gay closeted man in 1940s America. So yeah, I bought a copy on Comixology. I haven't cracked it open yet, but so the previews already. It's like Gary Frank did the art, and he's always amazing. So yeah, it's a win. It's probably going to be like 4 pages out of 100.
I think Cena's got a story in there too, I believe.
Oh yeah. He did Simon Baz. Right.
I have it on my phone too, and I haven't read it yet. So.
Next DCBS box. Yep.
Yeah, same here. I actually, I might go ahead and pick up the 80th anniversary issue at my local store because that's what I've been doing with a lot of the 80-year editions is that I've been ordering one for the DCBS box, just whatever year, and then going and getting one of the many different versions that they have.
Yeah.
Usually I pick up the 1940s covers because they're pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, we're going to wrap this episode up. And when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. And this is where we highlight something. It may be a comic book, but it also may be a film or a television show or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, may be interested in sampling. I will start with Steve. Steve, what is your Woof of the Week?
My Woof of the Week is actually going to be not a TV show like it always is. It's actually going to be another comic, and I'm not going to talk too much about it. I just want to, push it. This was one that my LCS actually just pulled, thinking that I would like it. And I was like, oh, I know nothing about it. Yes, I do appreciate my LCS as well. He doesn't usually come up and like scream at me to read something, but he just kind of slyly adds things to my pull list. This is Wind, or possibly Wind. I mean, like Marge Simpson, I've only ever seen it written down, so I don't know. But it's by James Tynion IV, with art by Michael Dialanas, and I believe Aditya Bidikar actually did the lettering on this one. But it's a cool fantasy, possibly maybe far future, post-magic, post-apocalyptic, post-human kind of storyline that reminded me a little bit of The Spire by Simon Spurrier from a couple of years ago, also by Boom. And it's an interesting story. It's obviously there's some magic, there's some supernatural elements, some fantasy, with some sort of like post-industrial kind of technology. And also at the heart, a very queer story. Because the main character, Wind, is gay and obsessed with another character who goes by the name Gardner, who is also gay, that we also learn sort of in the book as well. So the story is pretty cool. Some menacing bandaged man as the possible antagonist. And of course, just general prejudice and it's a very interesting story, and I can't go into too much without spoiling anything. So, wind or wind by Boone.
Okay, Bryan, how about you? What is your wolf of the week?
So I have been going back and learning all I can about ball culture because why not? It's, transgender, people of color, all of the roots of our gay culture, including all that Drag Race and RuPaul has appropriated. So might as well go to the source. So I've been watching two fantastic shows right now about that. I have been watching Pose, catching up on season 2. Season 1, and then I'm about to start season 2, I should say. And then Legendary, which is a contemporary ball televised event with some fantastic judges, including Miss Jamila from The Good Place as the core host. But I am learning so much and seeing all these connectivity points within, again, drag culture and queer history. Pose does a more, it's fictionalized, but it's still, I think, especially from what I've heard about season 2, a really good job of knitting together all these threads in a fictional world that is also representative of the actual ball culture in the 80s and early 90s. But yeah, if you're interested in ball culture, of course, Paris is Burning is still the best, of course, and then also the Queen, which I still have not seen. That's on my list as well.
The 1969 film?
Yeah.
On Netflix, yeah, I did watch about half of that.
Yeah, so that's on my list because
It's almost like looking into another world.
Yeah, that's what's so cool.
It's very cool.
I really am. I'm really digging all of this, and I think it's important right now. Not only is Pride Month to dig back into queer history, which is something I'm becoming more passionate about than I should have been years ago, but also our transgender and our Black community. And Latinx and just everyone that came together, in these pivotal moments in our history, and to not appreciate their contribution is to really be ignorant. And there's no point now because there's so much good content to learn about and to share. And I would highly encourage you. Pose is on Netflix now. It used to be just an FX, wherever FX is, Hulu maybe. But it's on Netflix now, and Legendary is on, I believe, HBO. So if you have those services, you or know your alternate means of finding them, check them out.
Your aunt's password, yeah.
HBO Max, yeah, definitely. If you've got somebody, get your aunt's password for that one.
Okay, Caleb, how about you? What's your wolf of the week?
So Bryan and I are in simpatico on this one. So very much in that same vein. I just finished all of Pose. And number one, Billy Porter is there's no words. But and not to spoil anything, but there's a line in that show somewhere in the second season where the character, it's a quote unquote butch queen who is wearing high heels. They're kind of poking fun of him, and he says, "I can be butch in this minute," and he crosses his legs and he says, "I can be femme in another." And for the first time in my life, I'm like, oh shit, that's fucking me. Like I was just like, hey, and that was a cool moment. But because I finished that, I went back and I've been watching some similar stuff. Because especially like you said, digging into trans culture. Look, the reason I could get married when I got married is because a black trans woman threw a brick at a cop. So, that's kind of badass. But there is a show, again, you can find it on Netflix. It's a documentary. It's called Disclosure. It's phenomenal, and what it does is it takes a very in-depth look at the treatment of trans bodies in Hollywood, in media, and it goes all the way back to the black and white pictures, to the silent films, and shows you that some of the people in that were whether or not they were trans in real life, they were men playing female characters, and sometimes a troublesome way, but in an academic way, you can go back and you can see that there were always trans bodies in film, and it goes all the way up through now, through Pose, but it is heartbreaking. It is eye-opening. It is prideful, but it's also mournful. They go through everything. I mean, the people that they have on the show, Laverne Cox, Jen Richards, Susan Stryker, who I've never seen in this context, but I have watched some interviews with her. She's an academic. She's brilliant. But they even get into, they don't really get into some of the RuPaul stuff, but there are some of the elements of the RuPaul stuff. They get into the fact that most of what you see on television is trans feminine. You don't see trans masculine bodies too often, and they really do a great job about laying it all out, everything, and it will, some of the real life trans characters who are in Pose are on there, MJ Rodriguez, and so if you get a chance, go sit down and watch it. It is well worth your time, and it will really. I really think it'll open your eyes, even if you're somebody who does know quite a bit about queer culture and trans history. There's a lot there that has been overlooked, that has been underserved, and Disclosure really speaks to that. So go check it out.
Right. Well, it looks like we have a very queer set of Woofs of the Week this week, and I'm going to continue in that idiom. And we had a video that was released yesterday, which kind of gave me some hope, though it wasn't the Punchy Players in name, it was the Punchy Players in practice. A very brief video of Lady Elaine Fairchild dealing with COVID. If you are unfamiliar with the Punchy Players, it's two guys, Jeff and Chris, out of Texas, and they have not made a video in 6 years. And they finally released a new one today for Pride Month. First one in 6 years, which includes some of the favorites from previous videos like Judy Garland and Tim Gunn, and Miller's Pride Frog, which you have to see to believe. There's even a mention of Heather at the Piggly Wiggly with her tattoos and her overalls and no glamour. Punchy Players, it's a series of videos it's effectively like stop motion photography with imitations. It's really hard to provide like as I said before, an elevator pitch to get the flavor of that. If you do want to see some of their best videos in the past, I definitely would go to Judy's Groceries and Hollywood Hoarder, Judy Comes to the Rescue. I would hit those first. They are very often repeated, those lines in this household, I can tell you, very often. So that's my Wolf of the Week, the Punchy Players on YouTube.
Are you going to be starting to add the looking like Esther Williams swimming pool when the pump broke, as one of your lines?
When Aunt B and Alice and Henry from Alice and Lady Elaine are buying the ice cream from Matthew Broderick. There's some really good lines there about the ice creams themselves. So it might be there where I find the quotes. Punchy Players, if you're unfamiliar, I think you'll be a little richer for it if you do sample. Dave, Zan, is there anything that you might want to throw out as a Wolf of the Week? It's perfectly acceptable if you would just want to leave it as the Dash Kickstarter. But if there is something that you think people might enjoy, we can provide that here for you right now, too.
Well, I've been catching up on my culture the past few months. So I don't know if you are familiar with the concept of telefidelity, but telefidelity is when you and your friend do not watch the show without each other, right? Mm-hmm. So this thing hit, and I used to go over to my friend Scott's house and stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning drinking red wine and white wine and all kinds of wine and watching some amazing show and being like, oh my God. So I stopped watching my favorite shows because I was like, for some reason, I was kind of like in the back of my mind waiting for him. So I finally finished the show Love on Netflix. Have you watched this? Oh, so it's a Judd Apatow produced project. It's not queer, but it's so queer. It's a love story between a really awkward guy and a really messy lady. And it's great. It's sad. It's frustrating. It's awkward. It's romantic. It's really great. And also Dua Lipa, her album Future Nostalgia. I've been playing it over and over and over again. And I tend to listen to music and not know anything about the person. I just listen to it. And I finally started watching her. I'm like, I can't. She looks like Gal Gadot. She's like, it's crazy. But she's like all disco, glam, amazingness. And that would be my gay adjacent suggestion for my woof of the week.
And Dave, how about you? Do you have anything?
Well, I mean, we already talked about Joe's glitter vapors. So, all I'm gonna say, and it's not that deep, but I just watched the first 3 episodes of Doom Patrol today. So, it's
a lot of feels. A lot of feels.
Dorothy made me cry every time she was on screen today. The first episode, I was just like teared up because
I got through the first 3 as well. Yeah, like just before we started this. Yeah.
That's all. That's pushes all those buttons. So.
The feels. All right, everybody, we're wrapping this one up in a bow. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to write to us, you can do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. And if you want to listen to us, please do so through iTunes. Please subscribe to us through that platform, and please leave a review if you can. You can also get us through Stitcher Radio and some of the other podcatching platforms. And we will be back next week. So until then, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Bryan Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
You're going to hear a woof and an explosion. Again, we'll be back next week. Take care, everyone.
Woof.